guys, it's me. So check it out. I have a bonnet. It is the most ridiculous thing I think I have pulled out in a long time. And you guys have seen some ridiculous things. Doesn't look like I got a whole lot of people here today. I know that some crazy storms ripped across the sort of East Coast and thereabouts last night and yesterday. And you know, I've noticed Thursdays don't seem to be as well attended as Mondays. I wonder about you guys. Are you trying to get out of work on Mondays? I think that's what's happening. That's okay. Doesn't matter. If you're here in spirit or you're actually here, that's all that matters. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off because I feel like I'm in a tunnel. So, yes, this is my Sunbonnet finery. This is one of those, I think, reproduction prints. I just love the print, and that's what initially drew me to this. And so, yeah, I had to have it. It seems to me that it's not that old. It's got a casing in it with elastic, but the elastic seems like it might be giving up the ghost. So I don't know, maybe this might be older than I think it is. I don't know. It's got a little bit of wear here where you can kind of see the buckram that's inside. So I just thought it was very cute. And a bonnet can be had for surprisingly little money. I think I paid like $11 for this. And I know that you can get these kind of, or you could, I don't know if this is still a thing, but you know, in Amish country, you know, the Mennonites and the Amish would make things like this, I think, and you know, for like sort of tourist trade. Definitely have seen these at a Mennonite market in Virginia. So, and oddly, I have another one that I'm saving for AQSG seminar, because you guys know I'm doing a study center on Sunbonnet Sue. So I have this other one that's made out of this like wild 1960s fabric. Now, as a kid, my grandmother had a couple of these hanging around, and she had ones that were not this pattern. Oh, what I meant to mention is the other one I have, bought them at completely different places from completely different people. I don't think either one of them, I mean, they were online, so I don't think either one of them were even in the same state, but they are the identical pattern, this one and the other one I have. Now, the ones my grandmother had, I think one was similar to this, but she had like two where the bill of the bonnet, the brim, oh, hey, Druid. I wasn't sure if you were here or not. Thank you, and no worries. I checked my levels on my mixer, so I think I'm getting better at that. But anyway, the brim on her bonnets were like slats of like cardboard, and it was like stitched in channels. So I guess you could flip the brim and take that stuff out and wash it, and then put those back in. So obviously this is not like that. This is just a buckram, you know, sort of like an inner lining. Any event, I just thought it was fun. So yeah, we're gonna do some Sunbonnet Sue stuff today. So hang that up. Stay up there. Okay. But first I have a bazillion announcements. So first of all, quilt nerding. Trying to do a better job of our cross promotioning. So for those of you, you know, and I do have, oh, you do have me at Max. You know what? I think it's probably my fan. There we go. Yeah, you know, I've been using my mic for something else, and it seems like, you know, I make some adjustments, and then it's like, oh, well, we're doing something different now. Let me make you quieter. So quilt nerding. I have a few new followers, and so I probably should say who I am. My name is Stephanie. I'm an artist and researcher, independent researcher. I love quilts like I love air, and this channel is not about learning how to quilt, but it is about studying quilts and looking at them and talking about them and material culture and all the stuff that is in the whole quilt ecosystem. So that's what we do here. And the other thing I do is called quilt nerding with my friend Jill, and we are on YouTube. Sometimes we do cross stream, although that's sort of a no-no on Twitch. But we do cross stream, and what we do over there is kind of more the same. We also have a book club where, you know, we discuss the books we've read, and every other week we do a needlework night, so we look at needlework tools, etc. So anyway, I have to do my little plug. If you want to check those things out, if you don't already follow us, I'll give you that link. So you can check out our old streams there. We are also on Instagram, and I'm going to share my screen for that one because we have a cool stream coming up soon that I want to let you guys know about. I'm literally sharing directly from Instagram. But we have agreed with our American Quilt Study Group friends. We're on a few committees, and we agreed to do kind of a Quilt Nerding Investigates seminar. For people that are maybe on the fence about attending seminar, or for those of you, I know there's a few of my Quilt Nerd Cakelet friends who are actually going to go to their first seminar and just interested to know, you know, what is it like? So we're going to do that. And, you know, if you have any questions, even if you're not interested in going to seminar right now, come by. We would really love to answer your questions because I think they would help other people that have, you know, are thinking about it and all that. You know, we sort of, we've talked about it in terms of the seminar committee, and I've sort of asked the question, you know, if people that are interested in going but don't register, like why? What are the reasons why? And one of them is kind of that intimidation factor of like, these are people that study stuff. These are academics. And yes, we do have some academics in the group. I'm not an academic, but I still study stuff. So, and there's lots of people that are not academics. They're just hardcore, nerdy, and just love to read and learn. So anyway, we want to talk about that. So we're going to be doing that on July 7th. So, and it'll be Sunday. It's a Sunday night. It'll be 7 p.m. Eastern. So, yeah, put that on your calendar if you're interested in joining us. Of the other things, you can see all of our fine videos. We are currently reading Crazy Quilts by Penny McMorris. And let me switch back to me. So, this is the book, Crazy Quilts by Penny McMorris. It is a fantastic book. We just started it this week. Our first get-together on it was on Tuesday. And I have learned so much. You know, I thought I knew some stuff about Crazy Quilts, and I mean, I did, but I kind of didn't. I've learned so much by reading this book. So, yeah, check that out, what we're doing here. And then at the end, this is going to be, for us, this is going to be a pretty quick book. I think it's only going to take us about 3 weeks to get through it because there's a lot of pictures. But at the end, Jill is going to share images and video from the New England Quilt Museum because they have a show right now up that is, I think it's called Stitch Punk. So it's kind of a steampunk thing. But that exhibit is kind of small, so the New England Quilt Museum decided to sort of round it out and make it a bigger show by pulling out their Crazy Quilts. Because Crazy Quilts and that whole Victorian steampunk kind of look kind of go together. So Jill's going to get us some cool videos and images of that. So I'm excited. That'll be when we finish the book. So check that out. And next Wednesday is a needlework nights on week because like I said, every other week, and we will be doing tomato pin cushions. And I stay away from Pinterest because it is dangerous, but I was searching for something today and just randomly came across this Pinterest post for something tomato pin cushion oriented. So of course I fell down the Pinterest rabbit hole of finding all kinds of fun other things, but I think we're gonna have some really cool stuff. I mean, when you think about the, you know, ubiquitous tomato pin cushion, I usually have one here at my desk, but I don't see it. Remember, the cat's probably knocked it off. But you think of that ubiquitous little red tomato pin cushion with a little strawberry emery, and you think, meh. But the takes that people have done with those are so interesting. So we're really going to explore that. It'll be so much fun. Other thing I wanted to mention, besides AQSG and our All About Seminar investigation, the 19th Century Blues Quilt Study book has been published. This is something that happens every 2 years with American Quilt Study Group. They select a topic and 50 people get in. They limit it because these quilts go on tour. But there's this topic, and your goal for over a 2-year period is to study a quilt in depth. And you have to write a piece about it, and then you have to take pictures, etc. There's some really beautiful stuff in here, so you can just see flipping through. Now, I took some video of the show when it was at seminar last year, and I think that's on my YouTube channel. I did not take a moment to snag that video, but I have showed it here. So I'll have to grab that again and let you guys see that if you're interested. And then the book, I think the book, this is like $23 on Amazon. And I did not, I don't have my act together today. I did not snag a link, but here's the title. And if 19th Century Blues, it'll come up pretty quickly if you search it. So on Amazon. So there's that. I think that's the big stuff. So today, like I said, I'm going to do a Sue-palooza. We can look at some Sunbonnet Sue stuff. Primarily some patterns and books and stuff. I just thought would be fun to look at because some of it is just crazy. Some of it is like, really? I'm supposed to make a quilt from this? So I thought it would be fun to look at that. And I know lots of folks that stop by here either have their own Sue quilts or a loved one, a mother, a grandmother, an aunt made them a Sue quilt. And so I love to hear those stories and talk about those things. And it's interesting when I see somebody's Sunbonnet Sue quilt and I can look in my little library and see, oh, okay, that was originally published in da-da-da-da-da-da. So, pretty cool. All right, so I am going to switch over. Move my keyboard. There's never a good place to put my keyboard. And look at my other camera. And unfortunately, some of these books are glossy, so we're going to get a glare, but we'll do our best. So this first one, I don't know why, I think I was just searching Sunbonnet Sue stuff, and this came across my desk. This book, it's called A Banner Year. I'm going to scoot the chat a little bit. Over there. Let me put myself over here. Actually, you know what? I can put myself in the chat there. So, Banner Year by Nancy Martin. And the intent is to do like these kind of calendar quilts. But there is, for April, we have Sunbonnet Sue and her boyfriend, Overall Bill. Now, he's got lots of different names. So we've got Overall Bill, we've got Sunbonnet Sam. He's sometimes called Farmer Fred. He's sometimes called, and sometimes he has a fishing pole and he is called Fisherman Fred. So I had always thought of him as her brother or her playmate. I once had a pretty famous quilter call him her lover. So I'm like, ew, they're children. But sometimes Sunbonnet Sue is not a child, as we will see as we look at these things. So this one was just neat because it was kind of unexpected that there was a Sunbonnet Sue in here. So Banner Year by Nancy J. Martin. Japanese books. Oh my gosh. There are so many Japanese craft and sewing books out there that are just so great. This one happens to be Sunbonnet Sue. Let's see if I can get that glare. Come on, glare. And Japanese quilters like Sunbonnet Sue. So I've got a number of those. And they tend to like traditional Sues as well as these kind of non-traditional Sues. And this book in particular just is so cute. Like they have these, I guess you could copy that. You could copy these little things. Oh, it completely fell apart. I need a new document camera. This one's really cruddy. All right, go back in there, you. Okay. This, I think you could probably make these into some little labels or something. Copy them, maybe put them on fabric. Quilt label stuff. Here in the front of the book. That glare was annoying me. And then, I mean, just the cutest stuff. They have a reference to Bertha Corbett Melcher's original Sunbonnet Sue drawings. They were called the Sunbonnet Babies. So they have the reference to that, and then just all of these different designers have made these really cute. You know, Sue walking in the rain, Sue with a happy birthday card. You know, and also the selection of fabrics, I think, with Japanese quilters is very, very charming. They have really cute fabrics and really cute novelty fabrics. Little bit different than the novelty fabrics, the novelty reproductions that we have, but also some similarities. So I think a lot of people that like those, you know, some reproduction fabrics also are drawn to the Japanese fabrics. Yeah, here's a Christmas one. I don't know, what is Sue doing here? Oh, this is an alphabet. Ah, that's cool. Look, that's an M. I guess that makes an H. Very cute. I haven't looked at this book in detail. I literally just got it. Oh, and I've noticed they've got this little. I can't get it close enough. This little page marker here that shows the Sue. Very cute. Of course, it's all written in Japanese. So, but the neat thing is, if you have, I'm an Android person. I have an Android phone, so I have. That's kind of an odd looking Sue. She's very wide. I guess her skirt's blowing around. This Sue has hair. My Android phone, I don't know if iPhones have this. I'm sure they do. But Google has a translate feature, so you could literally have a picture or, you know, a printed page that has foreign writing on it, and you can translate it. It works pretty well with modern, you know, books and things. It'll, you know, the translations aren't perfect, but you know, I think they're good enough that you can usually get the gist of it. And these books are really well written, so it works pretty well with them. So here's Sue, and I guess this is Fred, Sam, whatever we're gonna call him. Okay, all right. Here's Sunbonnet Babies. I guess this is a Valentine's card that they've taken this from. Here's our little guy. He's got a balloon. You know, just so many just cute little. Oh, here they are getting married. These cute little. Oh, this one's fun. Look at this. They're the king and queen for a set of playing cards that they've made into a. Oh, and look, B for Bill, S for Sue. That is very cute, very charming. Now, I think a lot of people like Sunbonnet Sue. I've been doing sort of an informal poll over the past like 4 or 5 years, and you know, there's some people that are just like, Sue's not my thing. I think more people say they like Sue than don't, but I think the people that don't like Sunbonnet Sue, it tends to be because it's too cutesy. You know, they tend not to like this, you know, cutie stuff, which I understand. You know, there's one that's sort of a crazy quilt Sue. You know, but I understand, like, sometimes this stuff is really saccharine sweet cute. This one's fun. Just little 3-dimensional stuff, little pansies. Yeah, I drew it. I have some screenshots of stuff. I've been collecting them on my phone. As I'm looking through, oh, that's cute. That's like the rabbit moon. As I've been looking through like Mercari and eBay and Etsy, you know, places where they're selling things, oh my gosh, you could literally spend probably a week looking at all 3 of those sites and never get done because there is so much Sunbonnet Sue stuff out there. Um, but as I find things that are just bizarre, but that I would not spend the money to add to my collection because they're just so horrible and expensive. They're literally these things that I'll have to show them another day. I'll have to kind of show off some of the crazy stuff I found. They're these like hoop art. Sometimes people do it with quilts, like quilt blocks and things. They'll put that in a embroidery hoop and to hang it on the wall. These things are like that I have found, and they're like $40 and $50 each. I just cannot. I just can't spend that kind of money on this thing. These things are so awful. But they're Sunbonnet Sues, but they're 3-dimensional, so they've been stuffed, and some of them literally have like an actual little basket and hair that's 3-dimensional. It's like all this 3-dimensional kind of flat doll that's still it's dimensional. They are so ugly. I could not get over it. I was like, ugh, I could not have this thing in my home. So you find a lot of things like that, where people have just, said, oh, so cute. Let's really, really be all in with this. So if you're not familiar with, oh, look at this. This is cute. This is a foundation piece, Sue. And apparently a back version. So you have all the little foundation papers. If you're not familiar with Japanese craft books, first of all, they can be really pricey. I waited a very long time to buy this book because it cost me a fortune. I'm not going to tell you how much because I still am spanking myself for how much it cost me to buy this and have it shipped. It is not cheap to get things shipped from Japan. Although they do ship quickly and they usually ship through FedEx. So you can be sure you're going to get your thing. But, you could sometimes find these books. I know when I was in San Francisco a number of years ago, down in Chinatown, they had some bookstores that, like Japanese and Asian books, and they did have a craft section. But the Japanese books specifically they're written in such a way that you don't actually have to be able to read. You can literally get the gist of what is happening with these pictures. They do such a good job of illustrating, and this is kind of standard. There's tons and tons of different presses. I mean, it's in Japanese, so I don't know, what these, the name of this publishing company is, but it seems like all of these different craft magazine or craft book, in magazines too, craft book publishing, they do it this way, and so it's really, really obvious to you what you're supposed to be doing. They're showing, this is those little pansies. They're showing all the steps, for doing this. And, I could see maybe somebody who's never picked up a needle and thread or done anything, crafty might pick up one of these books and just say, like, I don't know what's going on. But I feel like if you followed instructions in other craft books, this should be no problem. If you get your hands on a Japanese craft book, they're really great. But yeah, if you look around, I think if you're in a bigger city or near a bigger city, you can sometimes find these in bookstores, particularly if there's like a Chinatown or kind of an Asian area. And sometimes I find them through like used book places, but for the most part, you're probably looking at buying them directly from Japan. And there are a number of sellers on eBay, Japanese booksellers on eBay. So, something to save your pennies for if you're interested in some of these. And I mean, the Japanese quilting is a huge thing, and Japanese quilters make very interesting quilts. So that's a general thing to look out for too. Now, of course, do I have one? No, I have two. This is the other one. And this one has kind of very similar stuff in it, but it's different projects. Whereas that other one was kind of a lot of kind of wall hangings and things. This one has all kinds of different stuff. So like play mats and a bib, little tote bags, things like that, kind of different than were in the other book. So But again, you can see it's the same kind of illustrations. So that kind of step you through. This one looks like it's more photographs than illustration, but oh, look at that. That's interesting. Yeah, the little caddy. Great stuff. You know, and again, these fun pictures. These look very, very much like the Sunbonnet Babies. You know, it's like they've taken those original Bertha Corbett Melcher designs. Is it Bertha Corbett Melcher? Bertha Melcher Corbett. I can't remember which way. But they've taken those and just redrawn them, because I'm literally looking at something I have hanging on my wall, and I can see some of these. So they've literally redrawn these, sort of simplified, which is totally okay, because Sunbonnet Babies is in the public domain. And if you weren't aware, the original Sunbonnet Babies, so I showed in the front of this book. These Sunbonnet Babies, they were originally children's primers, or primers, however you would say that, or reading books. So kind of like, you know, Dick and Jane, except the Sunbonnet Babies were usually up to more interesting things than Dick and Jane were. I think eventually there was like Sunbonnet Babies Go to Italy. there was all kinds of books. So those are the 2 Japanese books I have. Oh, and this one. I forgot to show this one. This is A Century of Sunbonnets by Betty Alderman Designs. This one was kind of an impulse buy because typically I have like you can see, I have a number of these pattern books, but for the most part I'm kind of like, I'm not going to really make any of these necessarily, so I don't want to load up on pattern books as I'm looking for things to add to the collection. But this one had some really interesting Sues. So look at this particular one. It's very antique looking. It's this Sue. It just looks, not new, not modern. Whereas these Sues look very modern to me. And then this Sue is really fun. The bending over Sue. That's got this very 1930s. Yeah. So do you mean this one, Druid, the black and red one? I think it does have like kind of an Asian look. That sort of simplicity, and the little flower, the way she's holding the flower. Yeah, I like it too, and it's different. Yeah, so here it is. The pattern is fairly large, but I really like the look of that one. I've never seen that one. But this one has the fold out pattern. So it's just a few Sues in this one, and this one's almost more of like a pamphlet. Nostalgic lady. This is grown up Sue. There's lots of names for this stuff. She's calling this one Bloomer Girls. Bloomer Girls is the one that's on the teapot or the watering can. You can see her underpants or her bloomers. This particular one reminds me of those. I don't know if you've seen these. I mean, they're probably concentrated in the southern part of the U.S. But there are things like this that people make wooden cutouts, like large wooden cutouts of these, and stick them in front of their flower bed. And so you drive by, and at first glance you're like, oh, it's a person bending over watering, but it's really like a wooden cutout. That's what these things remind me of. I mean, it literally looks just like that. I don't know, they're kind of tacky. No offense to anybody that has one, but they've always been not my jam. So, okay. So, oh, look, so cute. Okay. So this is another one. I think somebody gave me this. Sunbonnet Sue, a collection of 12 old and new favorites. So it's a wide variety of Sues. You see the very basic one, and then you've got Sues through the ages doing all kinds of things. You got Angel Sue, a Parasol Sue, the Colonial Lady. She's considered a Sue. So, and then here's our little wind-blown flower Sue. This Now this is a reprint, but this is a 18-inch doll, vintage. I would say this is probably from the 50s or 60s. I think 35 cents, McCall's. I think it would be pretty easy to find the date on this. Yeah, it doesn't have the date, but I particularly bought this to make some tiny, some tiny bonnets. But I thought they were very cute. They make a nice thing for the collection. This is another thing that somebody gave me because, so this is Aunt Martha's from Ben Franklin. And it's got a bunch of different, mid-century stuff. I'm trying to see, does this have a date on it? No, this one doesn't have a date either. But I think, again, these things are usually pretty easy to figure out the dates on, even without a date. But, like 1950s, 1960s probably. Could be earlier, I'm not sure. Where'd they go? Not in here, I know. Put her down. Here we go. Look at all of the little Sues and Sams. Aren't they cute? Now this one, these I really liked because they're very simple. They're tiny. These are all very small. And I think this is meant to make a small quilt. So, very cute stuff. Okay, now we have the family reunion. And I have talked about these before, but this is a very weird situation. So, first of all, my son's cat loves to chew the corners of stuff. This makes me crazy. He has literally bitten like a dozen of my softcover books. I don't know how to stop him because he finds them. If I don't put them in the bookshelf, but that's probably how to stop him, is shelve my books. But, sometimes you're looking at the books. In any event, what's the deal with these books? There are multiples of this, and I have a few others. I don't have all of them. This is one. This is album 3. This is album 1. I think there's definitely a 2. Well, obviously there's a 2. I think there's a 4 and a 5 as well. I think. But anyway, what the gist of this is this couple, Dorothy May and Harold Groves. They put out a call for Sunbonnet Sue patterns and blocks, and then they did a show. Unfortunately, none of this stuff has been documented. Like, where did it come from? Was it an existing pattern? Was it like Ladies Art Company? Was it in a magazine? Was it what was it? Where'd it come from? Or did somebody draw this on their own? Is this a self-designed or did your grandmother make it? Whatever. Nothing. So that is super irritating. But there are definitely some interesting Sues that people sent in. So one I love is the Old Dutch Cleaners. This is literally taken from an actual product. And it's this little Dutch woman. So that one we can identify, somewhere along the line somebody just made a pattern from the product. But, some of these others, like, I don't know, did somebody, this one is just kind of the basic Sue, but she's got a flag. So did somebody, like, trace the basic Sue and then said, okay, I'm going to put a flag in there and make her my own? I don't know. Another very basic Sue. This one looks kind of like the Sunbonnet Babies. There's a chicken, but in many of these, it's anybody's guess. So the Groves put these together. They did exhibits of them. Now this Fisherman Fred, I have a quilt of him. And I think I tracked down the pattern on this one. But many of these, it's pretty hard, which is disappointing again. This one, let's see. Come over and play with me. This looks like it's literally taken from some kind of, maybe it was the actual Sunbonnet Babies. Some children saying, oh, this one, she's got a computer. So yeah, there's a lot going on here. And we have no idea where this stuff has come from. You know, in some cases, they're so weird looking. Like, what happened to this Sue? Her bonnet is all smashed down. Oh, look. Sue cutting paper dolls. You know, they're, I mean, ingenious. But still, no idea where some of this stuff came from. Now, here's the little windblown Sue. So we can go back to, was it Betty Alderman? Which one of these? Oh, here she is here. Now, you could sometimes kind of backtrack on these. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's hard. So, but we do have the actual patterns of these applique patterns. And in this case, oh yeah, they do have who sent them in. You know, the people that sent them in. And that's all well and good. But these are not the people that designed these. They may be the people that made the block. And they may be the people that sent in the pattern. But this is a Girl Scout Sue. You can see her Girl Scout cookies box. And it says this is a blue ribbon. So I guess the blue ribbon ones, it seems like, made it to, you know, the actual quilt. Whereas the ones that aren't blue ribbon, I guess, didn't. Not sure. So they managed to make so many volumes of this. I mean, wow. You know, more of the same. You know, these are, they continue to be cute and interesting, or terrifying and weird. So this is a fun one. She looks kind of like a little exaggerated Holly Hobby. Yeah, this one is definitely one of the Sunbonnet babies. Like you know, absolute copy, because of the frilliness of the sunbonnet. That's definitely one of the Sunbonnet baby illustrations. So, you know, and the thing is now, Bertha Corbett's, okay, it's Bertha Corbett Melcher. I think I might have had it backwards. Her original drawings, like I said, they've been in the public domain for a very long time. So, you know, it's simple to copy her stuff. It's no problem there. But some of these other ones, you know, if it's a pattern that somebody designed more recently, you know, within certain periods of time, and maybe, you know, sometimes people do actually renew their copyrights, you know, or did renew their copyrights. Copyright works a little bit differently now than it did, you know, throughout the 20th century. You know, this could be a copyright violation. So I don't know. These books were interesting to me just from that perspective, and that there's some fun ones in here. But if you're trying to do a historical study of Sunbonnet Sue, these are very unhelpful. And now this is a Sunbonnet Baby Transfer Designs. So these are like iron-ons, and these are pretty good. You've got a lot of the original Sunbonnet Babies stuff in here, and I think there's some kind of these were a different set of illustrations than these, but they're all still, you know, the originals. So these are quite nice. This is a nice book. You know, if you wanted to do red work, make little Sue red work, or you know, some just embroidery, this is a really nice book. So, and also it's volume 1. There's definitely more of them. Now, if I remember correctly, yes, this is another Harold and Dorothy May book. I bought this one because it has, you know, all of the little designs around it, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's a good companion to this. Which I don't think this one is Harold and, let me double check. So this one was done by Hobby House Press. I'm trying to see, I don't think that Harold and Dorothy May were Hobby House. No, they were Groves Publishing. So yeah, these are from completely different sources. So this one, but again, I'm seeing like, oh, so maybe there's some interesting stuff done with these. No, these are the most horrible. No offense to the Groves, but I mean, look at this. These are just really bad. Photocopied, not redrawn. This is a Marie Webster quilt. But there is no reference to Marie Webster here, and this does nothing for the Marie Webster design. The Marie Webster design is very pretty. You really cannot tell how lovely this real quilt is. And so that kind of annoyed me with the Groves, and I kind of thought, they were putting this stuff together back at a time when the 80s. I think they did a lot of stuff. They compiled all the Kansas City Star stuff by year. They were putting together a lot of stuff, and I kind of understand where they were coming from as far as getting those things out to quilters, because quilters were, and needle workers were really hungry for this stuff. But I also go back to the fact, like, this book was originally $12.95, and whenever that was, let me see, is there a year in here? Well, okay, whoever had this book originally, because I did buy this secondhand, had this in March 1990. So this book dates to at least then, although I would say 1989. Here we go. So this is 1989. And publishing books back then was a big deal, because they did not do things digitally then. It really was like this, you either photocopied or did mimeograph if you were self-publishing, or you spent a lot of money for an actual publisher. So I don't fault them that, but I'm also like, what am I supposed to do with these things, and why in 1989 or 1990 would I spend $12.95 on this? I wouldn't spend that much money on this today. I think I spent less money on this book than that. And what is this? This is terrifying. Who is this little guy? Yeah, anyway, no offense to them, but yes, kind of offense. So, all right, this one, I'm going to hold this one back for a sec. This is a different book that we want to talk about. So Sunbonnet Sue's Neighborhood, this is Oxmoor House. And so Oxmoor House are those very basic, crafting kinds of things. But, from a pattern perspective, there's the girl with the little fried egg, fried egg flour. From a basic perspective, these were pretty cool. And again, these are definitely based on, these original patterns, but, there's not like the historical, like, where was this pattern originally printed? Was it in the newspaper? Was it in a magazine? Was it ladies? And I don't know if some of that is just not caring about copyright, or not knowing about copyright, or I don't know. So anyway, but there's a little doll here, very cute stuff. Here's the indigenous Sue. This is the Umbrella Sue. We've got Fisherman Fred and the Windblown Girl. So, all right, Oxmoor House. So, all right, this last one, the Sunbonnet Family. We really do the Sunbonnet Family thing. This one is Dolores Hinson, and this is a pretty thick book. But again, it's like more of the same. Now, this one, I believe, has some information about where this stuff comes from, maybe. So this one definitely has a date. But, it could be that these are, sort of generic. Got 1907 here. Sunbonnet Babies, 1907. That's the little kissing couple that was in the Valentine card. Yeah, so it's again like one of these sort of mishmash books. Oh, here's the Old Dutch Cleaner trademark. Oh my gosh, this says designed by Bertha Corbett. So I'm wondering, Bertha Corbett as an illustrator, it sounds like she actually did work for. So this is from an advertisement, page 598 of the October 1908 issue of the Delineator. So the Delineator being, one of those, I don't know, general magazines, I think, that like kind of, what are those farm magazines? I think that must be where it comes from. But I didn't realize that was a Bertha Corbett, according to this. So the more you know. Yeah, so it looks like there's some good, general quilting information in here. The illustrations are a little bit better than the Groves book, but, still I go back to, this is like almost like a mass published paperback sort of dealio. So I don't hate it. It's just, again, doesn't have the data in it that I want as a studier of quilts. All right, so now this last one. A Meeting of the Sunbonnet Children, Betty Hagerman. Now, Betty Hagerman was the president of the Kansas City Quilt Guild that Barbara Brackman belonged to back in the 80s or 70s, in the 70s. And some of the members of that guild made the Sunsets on Sunbonnet Sue quilt. And that quilt was inspired by Betty Hagerman. Not because Betty Hagerman liked that quilt or was interested in that quilt, but because Betty Hagerman was insufferable with Sunbonnet Sue. And they were so sick of it that they decided to sort of dig at her by making a Sunsets on Sunbonnet Sue quilt. And so that's kind of the history of that quilt. But what Betty Hagerman did, as insufferable as she may have been about loving Sunbonnet Sue, she documented where many of these designs came from, where they were published, etc. So I consider this is kind of the Bible. By all means, it does not cover every single version of Sue, Sam, /Fred, /Bill that you could think of or see, but it's got a lot of them. It's got like all the Aunt Martha's stuff, work basket, just any of the places that you might find these. So and it's fairly easy to find this book. Yeah, 1979 is when this came out. So it's pretty easy to find this book. It's not terribly expensive. So if you, want to get a copy and look to see if you could find your Sue, there's a good chance it's in here. But it has this one color picture of a whole bunch of Sunbonnet Sues. See, she made this in 78, and she calls it A Meeting of the Sunbonnet Children. So it's, from the title of the book. So interesting. So that's our Sunbonnet Sue-palooza. Some of this stuff I'm going to be digging into more deeply with my study center at AQSG seminar in September. So, all right. Let's see. Yeah, Druid, I think it might just be you and me here today. So I'm going to finish reading from the Chintz Book. The Chintz Book by MacIver Percival, 1923. It has been an interesting book. And, I have learned some things. I hope you all have too. But we got a chinsult out of this, which is one of the best insults of fabric I've ever heard. We've got some really beautiful color plates in this book. I think there were three or four of them. And so we're in the last chapter about French chintz, but also I had started looking at the appendix, which We started, and I read the first part the other day. It is the translation of an account given by the Jesuit priest Father Cordu of the Indian traditional methods of producing fast colored decorated cottons. So the Indian chintz, the stuff that was coming out of India, and was very popular in, from late 1600s. I think they have it documented actually down in the islands. But, in the 1700s, just, explosion of interest in these chintz fabrics. And, the UK passed some laws to protect their own efforts and also kind of create a sumptuary situation where lower class people could not get their hands on the good Indian chintz. So anyway, we read through, I guess it was parts 1 through 3 of this, how to make this preparation. We've got buffalo milk. We've got this dried powdered fruit called kadu. And I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's kind of sounds like a bitter plum or maybe a persimmon, something like that. And they dry it, they grind it, and it acts as a mordant to the fabric, for the fabric dyes and the printing. And they use buffalo milk to create like a ground, on the fabric, and to prepare it for the dyeing and the printing. So we've done all that in the appendix. So let's move on to afterwards, after those things have been done. And they draw and paint on the black parts, which are usually stems and outlines and things. So the next thing we do, we get into part 4 of the process. So after having drawn and painted with black all the parts required, the red outlines of the flowers and other things which should be drawn in this color are added. The blue, which requires a great deal of preparation, is also applied. And I don't know if their blues were indigo, I think. Firstly, the cloth is put into boiling water and left for half an hour. If 2 or 3 kadus are added to the water, the color will be improved. The cloth is soaked all night in water in which the droppings of sheep and goats have previously been steeped. Ew. So if your chintz has a questionable smell, now you know why. Next day, it is washed and exposed to the sun. So I think some of this, it's, there's chemical reactions going on with this, this fruit and the buffalo milk, and then putting things in the sun also will create reactions. When the Indian painters are asked what purpose is served by this last operation, they reply that it removes the qualities imparted by the kadu, and that if this has been retained, the blue, which is now about to be applied, would become black. So they have to get rid of the mordant qualities, I guess, of the kadu, the powdered fruit, in order for the blue to work correctly. So, it's so interesting to me, like, again, we're talking about a time period, and, culturally, these folks didn't have, color and dye creating chemistry labs. Like, this is like old knowledge, I guess. And you kind of wonder, like, how did somebody figure this stuff out? Like, these are some very, very, very in-depth processes. So another reason for this operation is that it whitens the cloth. For as before remarked, it was only half bleached at the beginning. In exposing it to the sun, it should not get entirely dry, but should be sprinkled with water from time to time throughout a whole day. Then it is beaten on a stone, but not with a beetle as in France. Now, this is something we don't know about yet because we still need to go back and read the French chapter. So I don't know what a beetle is. They're spelling it B-E-E-T-L-E. My guess is it's some type of like mallet or something like that. But we'll find out. The Indian method is to fold it several times and to beat it heavily with a stone, using the same movements as do locksmiths and blacksmiths when striking their large hammers on an anvil. When the cloth is beaten enough in one part, they continue beating it in another. in another. 20 or 30 blows are enough at this time. And what we learned from the earlier part of the appendix is, they're saying a stone, but they talked about these like a maul, like this thing for beating. And I'm picturing in my mind at first, like, a baseball bat, something like that. No, these things were huge. Like, they're hammering away with something very big. So I think not only do you have to, know all of this really complicated process, you also have to be strong enough to pick up some big, rock and beat this fabric. It's really fascinating. When the cloth is beaten enough, we already 20 or 30 blows. When this is done, the cloth is again soaked in rice water. And remember, rice water has some special properties because of the starches and the micro grittiness of the rice flour or rice powder that's coming off the rice. If they have it, they put some kavaru to boil on the fire as if it were to be cooked. And before the water thickens too much, they soak the cloth, remove it, dry it, and beat it with the katapuli as they did at the first operation in order to make it smoother. So the katapuli is the big thing. They said it was as big as a man's leg. So, I guess, are we talking about a skinny man? Or are we talking about an average man? I don't know. Are we talking about a calf or a thigh? Not sure. These details matter, Father Cordu. As the blue is not applied with a brush, but by soaking the cloth in prepared indigo, it is necessary to coat the cloth with wax all over except on those parts which are already black and those where blue or green are to appear. So, beetle mallets, also called a persuader or commander, are large mallets with a wood or plastic head with rounded ends about 15 to 18 inches in diameter. Wow, that's pretty big. And a handle about 3 feet long. It was used by paveurs for tapping paving stones into position when bedding them. Okay, so yeah, it has to be something that's pretty heavy. Yeah, heavy and big, it makes sense. But gosh, so what, 3 feet long? That's pretty long. That's at least as long as a man's arm, if not longer. And then what? It's diameter, right? Not circumference. So gosh, yeah. We're talking like, that's about 12 inches. So we're talking about something bigger than that. That's a big hammer. That's a lot. Okay. The wax is applied with an iron brush as lightly as possible on one side only, taking care that no part remains uncoated except those that he's already mentioned. Otherwise, there will be blue marks which are uneffaceable. Uneffaceable. I guess it means you can't get them out. Tied with bleach was not available. The cloth is then exposed to the sun, taking care that the wax only melts enough to penetrate to the other side. It is then turned over and rubbed briskly with the hand. The better way is to employ a round-bottom copper vessel, which spreads the wax all over, except to those parts which are on the other side, should be dyed blue. This preparation being completed, the painter hands on the cloth to the blue dyer. Now, it sounds like there was multiple people involved in the process, so you probably have, people that are very good at tiny detail, and then you have people that are strong and can, beat the cloth. So the blue dyer returns it after some days, for it must be noted that it is not the ordinary painters, but special work people or dyers who carry out this work. Having asked the painter if he knew how to prepare the indigo, he told me he did and described it to me in the following manner. Perhaps you may be able to compare it to the methods used in the American islands. Here, they take down the leaves of the avari, or of the indigo, well dried and reduced to a powder. This powder is put into a large vessel filled with water. They beat it in the sun with a bamboo split into four, which has the four extremities extended apart. A bamboo split into four. Okay. I'm guessing to make it like kind of a whisk, but it's the four sections are like out like that. The water is then allowed to escape through a little hole in the bottom of the vessel, at the bottom of which is the indigo. It is taken out and broken into pieces the size of a pigeon's egg. How big is a pigeon's egg? Yay big. They then spread ashes in the shade, and on those ashes they lay a cloth upon which the indigo dries. It is then ready for use. After that, it only remains to prepare it for the cloths which are to be dyed. The workman, having powdered sufficient indigo, puts it in a large earthen vessel, which he fills with cold water, adding to it a proportionate amount of lime, also powdered. And here we're assuming that it's like, was it sodium, like lye? A quarter the size of a chicken egg. Okay, so yeah, so about yay long. That's about what I thought. A little bigger than a robin's egg, not as big as a chicken egg. So I think when he says lime, he's meaning like lye. Like this lime is something that you would get from ashes. And I think that's what he's meaning here. Limes are also available in India, so I wasn't sure. Do they mean like they dry limes out and powder them up? I know. I think he's talking about the ashes, the sodium something. You can use it to make soap if you add fats, saponification, or you could use lime as a mordant. And it's like a, again, it's a sodium something that will fix color in fabric. Let's see. Then he examines the indigo to make sure it is not sour, in which case he adds more lime, as much as is necessary to make it lose the smell. Oh, so if your indigo is sour, just throw more lime in. Then, taking some grains of tavari, about a quarter of a bushel, I don't know what that is, he boils them in a bucket of water for a day and a night, keeping the cauldron full of water. He then turns all, grain and water, into the vessel containing the indigo. Okay, so tavari must be, like, literally grain. Calcium oxide. That's what it is. Yes, quicklime. Oh, so it's from limestone. See, I'm kind of thinking, this is one of those things where I very well have gotten all this stuff mixed up. But I think we're not talking about quicklime either. I think we're talking, because like a quicklime I know my grandfather used to use, like in the garden. It changes the pH of the soil. I could be wrong, but I really do think that really the lime they're talking about is coming from like ashes from. I'm gonna have to look into this afterwards. I could be totally wrong about all this. Okay, so tavari sounds like it is a grain, not grains like pieces, but grain like wheat, oats, that kind of grain. So he turns all of this into the vessel containing the indigo. This dye is kept for 3 days, care being taken to mix it well together, stirring it 3 to 4 times a day with a stick. If the indigo again becomes sour, more lime is added. That's a lot of work. All right, maybe it's soda ash I'm thinking of. Druid, you help me become less stupid. When lime and soda ash combine in a classic metathesis reaction, they produce lye, or sodium hydroxide, and then that is where you can then take it to soap, right? Lye combines the solubility of soda ash with the alkalinity of lime. Okay. I think I probably need to educate myself better on these processes. I did know about soap, but obviously I didn't have all the details straight in the old brain box. Okay. So the blue dye thus being prepared, the cloth is immersed after being folded in two in such a way that the right side is outward and the wrong side within. It is left to soak for about an hour and a half. Then it is removed to a suitable place. You can see, therefore, that the Indian cloths should rather be called dyed than painted. That's a lot of work, right? I mean, that, again, and I go back to the fact, how did they figure this stuff out? How did, along the way, did these artisans or just workers of any kind figure out this process? It's so complicated. The lengthiness and variety of the processes for blue dyeing gave rise to a difficulty which I laid before the painter. Could not, I said, all the flowers be painted blue with a brush, especially when there are only a few of them in the piece? It certainly could be done, he replied, but the blue would not be fast, and after being washed 2 or 3 times would disappear. I asked him to what he attributed the fastness of the color, and he unhesitatingly replied to the tabari seeds. The seed is native to the country. It is light brown or olive color, cylindrical, a line long, and split at the end. I guess a line would be a measurement. It is difficult to break with the teeth, insipid, an insipid grain, and leaves a slight bitterness in the mouth. After the blue, the red must be added, but first the wax must be removed from the cloth. It must be bleached and prepared to receive this color. So, yowza. So much work. And again, they're boiling wax out of this cloth and then, I think, putting it back. The way to remove the wax is to put the cloth in boiling water. The wax melts, the fire is slackened in order that it may solidify, and the wax is removed very carefully with a spoon. The water is again brought to a boil, and what remains of the wax is removed. So, like, that's a lengthy process. I mean, that's like, you think about skimming, like if you make chicken broth, and you want to skim the fat off the top, you know, you've got to cool it off, and then you skim it. But imagine you had to get lots of fat out of there, and you'd have to like fire it up again and then let it cool. It's a lot of work and a lot of time. Although the wax becomes very dirty, it may be used again and again for the same purpose. In order to bleach the cloth, it is washed in water and beaten 9 or 10 times with a stone and immersed in fresh water in which some sheep droppings have been soaked. Oh my gosh, the goat and the sheep poo. Like, what? It is again washed and spread out in the sun for 3 days and sprinkled with water as before. They soak on earth called ola, which is used by the washermen, in cold water and immerse the cloth in it for an hour, after which they light a fire under the vessel, and the water begins to boil. They take out the cloth and wash it in a pond, on the edge of which they beat it 400 times on a stone, and then wring it thoroughly. Then it is soaked for a day and night in water, in which it has been mixed a little of the droppings of a cow or female buffalo. So now we've got 3 animals' poop that's involved in this. And some dried fruit and some grain and, oh my gosh. Whew. Then in order to make the cloth ready to receive the red coloring, the operation of kadu must be repeated as before. I mean, how long does it take them to make this? I mean, you think just the washings and the dryings. I mean, forget about the soaking and poop, but the washings and the dryings are taking forever. Let's see. So soaked in the infusion of the kadu, and it is washed, beaten on a stone, and dried. After this, it is soaked in buffalo milk, in which it is stirred and rubbed with the hands in order that it be thoroughly wet through. Then they remove it, wring it, and dry it. Then, where it is necessary to have white marks, such as pistils, stamens, and other details in the red flowers, they are painted with wax, after which the red dye, which has been previously prepared, is painted with an Indian brush. So at least these colors they can paint. They don't have to do this whole dye thing. The red is often applied by children, as it is not a difficult task unless a very perfect piece of work is required. Let us now see how this red color is prepared. Take bitter water, that is to say, the water of certain wells which have this taste. An artesian well? I don't know. Into 2 pints of water, put 2 ounces of powdered alum. Add to it 4 ounces of the red wood called vartanqui, or sapin wood, also powdered. Let it stand in the sun for 2 days, taking care that nothing falls in it to soil it, or the color will be weakened. If the red is to be deeper, add more alum. If lighter, add more water, in order to obtain the different tints and shadings of color. Oh, man. To obtain a color like wine lees, and if I remember correctly, wine lees are kind of the sediment of the wine, right? I think. So wine lees, rather inclined to violet, you must take 1 part of the red, made just as described, and 1 part of the black described earlier. Add an equal part of rice water, which has been kept 3 months, and mix it until the required color results. Now, I can tell you rice water that's been kept for 3 months probably stinks to high heavens. It probably does not smell good because that's like fermented. There is a ridiculous supposition amongst these Gentiles on the subject of sour rice water. It is that anyone can use it himself any day of the week. But on Sunday, Thursday, and Friday, they refuse to give it to anyone who is short of it because they say it would drive their God out of the house. Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh, Druid. Growing up, I had a cradle in my room that my stepfather slept in as a baby. It was painted with a mixture of milk and ox blood. I could still thinking about it. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, milk paints are a thing. You know, it's like kind of whitewashing. I mean, you think at a time when they may not have had access to paint of any kind, at least they had a cow, maybe. And I know that you can add things like limestone and stuff to paints to make a colorant, but ox blood. Well, I mean, ox blood's a color, and I guess it would be. I mean, I generally think that when people say the color ox blood, they just mean it has the color of ox blood and not necessarily that it is ox blood. But yowza, that's interesting. Do you know how old it was? I mean, obviously your stepfather having slept in it gives you some idea of date, but was it something that came down in his family? I'm wondering. Very interesting. Okay, where did I leave off? Let's see. When kanji vinegar is unobtainable, they use the vinegar of kalu or of palm wine. Hi, Quiltish. Okay, he was born in 1927. Okay. So he would have just been a little bit younger than my grandmother. Yeah, they did some weird stuff back in the day. Oh, all right. So different colors may be used. Different colors may be made based on red, which it is useless to describe here. It is enough to say that they are painted the same time as the red. That is to say, before passing to the operation of which I am going to speak, after I have made some observation on the foregoing. So number 1, wells of bitter water are not common even in India. Sometimes there is only one in a town. I have tasted this water and do not find the quality attributed to it, but it seems inferior to ordinary water. It's inferior water. Some people say bitter water is used to improve the color of the red, but rather more commonly it is said that it is used to make it fast. I would say it could be both, right? Improving the color and making it fast. Oh, they used what they had. They were morticians. Interesting. So blood didn't make them faint. Yeah, I can understand that. Interesting. You've got such great stories, Druid. Okay, it is from Aachen that fine quality alum and sapin wood is brought to the Indies. But whatever virtue lies in this bitter water, it would neither make the colors fast nor beautiful if they did not add the dye of imburi. Or imbur. It's Imboure with the little over the E. This is more commonly called shiver or chia root. Chia. But to make use of this, the cloth must be washed in the pond in the morning, dipping it several times in order to soak it thoroughly, which is not easy because of the slight greasiness caused by the buffalo milk previously used. Okay. Whoever wished you an interesting life can just F off. It's have a good life. It's always have a good life, not an interesting one. Let's see. It's beaten 30 times and half dried. Whilst the cloth is being prepared, they also prepare the chia root thus. It is dried and reduced to a very fine powder in a mortar of stone, not wood, and a little bitter water is thrown in from time to time. I wonder why they call it bitter water. I'm assuming maybe it's the pH of the water, like maybe it's a more acidic water. You know, it's got something that's more acidic. I'm wondering if that's what they mean. Take about 3 pounds of this powder and add it to 2 buckets of tepid water, stirring it a little with the hand. This water becomes red, but rather an ugly color. Its purpose is to bring other reds to perfection. The cloth must be plunged in this and stirred and turned for half an hour, while the heat is increased beneath the vessel, and when it becomes too hot for the hand, those who take particular pains that their work should be clean and perfect remove the cloth, wring, and dry it. The reason of this is that during the painting of the red, it is difficult to avoid making blots here and there. It is true that the painter does his best to remove these, as one might do when writing, but there still remain some traces that are rendered more apparent by the infusion of chia root, and therefore they take out the cloth, as I have said, and remove them as best as they can with half a lemon. There's a lot of fruit. And there's a lot of food in general in the chintz. This done, the cloth is put back into the dye and the heat increased until the hand can bear it no longer, turning and returning the cloth for half an hour. At evening, the fire is made up and the dye is boiled for an hour or thereabouts. The cloth is removed, wrung out, and kept damp until the next day. Before passing on to the other colors, it is well to say something about chia. This plant is wild, and it is not necessary to sow it to supply the quantity required. It grows about a half a foot high. The leaf is light green, about 2 lines wide and 5 or 6 long. The extremely small flower is bluish. The seed is about the size of that of tobacco. This little plant has a taproot running sometimes to a depth of nearly 4 feet. A 4-foot-long taproot on this little tiny thing. That's interesting. But those that are about a foot long are the best. Though the main root is so long, the side roots are few and small. It is yellow when fresh, becoming brown on drying. It gives a red color to water only when fresh. On this head, I noticed a point which surprised me. I had made a red infusion, which was accidentally spilt during the night. On the following day, I was surprised to find at the bottom of the vessel some drops of yellow liquid had gathered. I suspected that some foreign body had caused this change of color and spoke of it to the painter, who told me that it only indicated that the chia was of good quality and that the water often takes the color of saffron. That's interesting. So we've got both like a golden color and a red color. I also noticed a surface film of a very fine violet on the overturned vessel. This plant is sold dry in bunches. The tops are cut off as only the roots are used. As the cloth had been entirely immersed in the dye and had soaked in the color, the following operations can be carried out without any danger of damaging the reds. They are the same that have already been described. That is to say, the cloth is washed in the pond, beaten 10 or 12 times on the stone, bleached with sheep droppings, and on the 3rd day soaked, beaten, and dried, being sprinkled with water from time to time. It is kept damp during the night and washed the next day and dried as on the day before. At last, at noon, it is washed in hot water to remove all soap and any dirt that had attached itself to it and thoroughly dried. Now we get to green. This has already taken like 8 years to get this far. The green color is prepared thus. Take a palm or a little more than an ounce of cadu flowers. So this isn't the fruit, this is the flowers. As much of cadu, a handful of the chia, and a very fine green is required, a pomegranate rind. Powder them and put them in 3 bottles of water and boil them until the quantity is reduced to 3 quarts and pour into a vessel through a linen cloth. Add half an ounce of alum in powder, stir for some time, and the color is ready. Painted over blue, this color gives green. So this is then probably a yellow preparation. For this reason, the worker who dyes blue is careful when painting on the wax to leave those parts clear of wax which should be green, so that the cloth already dyed blue should be in a proper state to receive the green in its turn. If not painted over blue, it would give yellow on a white cloth. This color, however, is not fast, like red and blue, and after several washings disappears, leaving only blue. There is, however, a way of fixing the color so that it will last as long as the cloth itself. And in this way, you take a banana bulb, peel it while fresh, and express the juice. Add 4 or 5 spoonfuls of this juice to a bottle of green dye. It will make the green permanent, but will spoil the beauty of the tint somewhat. So you can either have pretty green that lasts for 3 washings, or you can have ugly green that lasts forever. Now I'm interested. He says a banana bulb. Does that mean that bananas grow on trees that start off as a bulb? Does anybody know? I never thought, like, are banana seeds a thing? Like, how do you get bananas? How do you grow bananas? I don't know. I've never looked into it. All right. There remains but yellow, which will not require much explanation. The same dye used for green by painting over blue serves for yellow by painting on a white ground, but it is not permanent. However, if but little soap is used in washing these cloths, or if they are washed in water acidilated with sour milk or lemon juice, or soaked in water in which cow droppings have been mixed and passed through a linen cloth, these fugitive colors will last a long time. Let's see. People call them trees, but bananas actually grow from giant bulbs just like daffodils or tulips. Fascinating. That is fascinating. Yeah. I've never seen bananas growing in the wild, for one. I mean, I've seen how they, like, when they harvest them and they're on this, it's like a big bunch and then they break them down. But yeah, I had no idea. That's pretty cool. All right. Lastly, in conclusion, a few words may be said about the pencils used by the Indians. They are made of a little piece of bamboo, pointed and slit for about an inch from the end. Fastened around them is a piece of stuff soaked in the color they are using, which is squeezed to make it run as required. For wax, they use an iron pencil about 3 finger breadths long, which is thinner towards the top, and is inserted in a bit of wood which forms a handle. It is slit at the bottom and forms a circle in the middle, round which is fixed a bundle of hair about the size of a nutmeg, soaked in hot wax, which runs little by little down to the point of the pencil. And that's interesting because that's different than the way that they make batik. And batik, it's a little, like, it's almost like a little flat, sort of hollow, triangular shaped thing. And I can't remember what it's called. It has a name. And then it has like a little hole in the bottom, and it's almost like a little nib that comes down. And they use it, to almost like drizzle. They can almost drizzle the wax. Like they can heat that little metal piece. I actually have one. I did a little bit of resist dyeing when I was in school, and somehow I ended up with one of those. I don't know. I guess I bought it. Anyway, it was, we kind of were encouraged to try things like the old school way, and then usually when that was difficult, we would then go out and get the newfangled stuff. So, okay. Such, Reverend Father, is all I have been able to gather as to the fabrication of the painted cloths of the Indies. I do not know if I have been more successful in my discoveries than my predecessors, but as they neither knew the language, which is so absolutely necessary when conversing with the painters, nor the customs of dealing with them, as their position might naturally cause suspicion in the timid natives, I doubt their having carried out their orders as to this matter successfully. I do not wish to guarantee the exact truth of all I have reported. It would be difficult to avoid allowing some errors to creep in when dealing with those who know better how to work than how to explain. But as I have consulted many painters, it would be difficult for them to all conspire to deceive me. And it is likely that I am far from the truth. Okay, Father Curdew. Okay. So, now let's backtrack. And I want to finish the chapter 8, which is the last full chapter of the book. And then there's a couple other things in here that I think are kind of interesting. There's a timeline. If I have time another day, I'll talk about those. Because I just think it's interesting it's kind of an interesting outline. So, all right, so just as a reminder, we are reading the Chintz Book by MacIver Percival, and this is chapter 8, Printed Cottons in France, Oberkampf and the Toiles de Joie. Now, Oberkampf, we've heard his name before, or I think it is a person, right? Yes, it is a man. He's mentioned him before, but he hasn't really said who he is. We are going to find out. So Chapter 8, Printed Cottons in France. The history of French chintzes, or as they are called in France, Indiennes, and that's Indiennes, which just means Indians, is summed up in a single name, that of Oberkampf. This extraordinary man, during his long life, saw the art of cotton printing in France pass from its half-strangled infancy to its full maturity in the early 19th century, by which time it had become one of the leading industries of France. So that's interesting that he's saying early 19th century. But I think as we're about to find out, the French have known about the chintzes longer than that. So Indian chintzes had been introduced into France in the 17th century, and their history closely resembles that of their arrival in England, which makes sense. France and England are not that far apart. They swiftly became the height of fashion and roused the opposition of all interested in the woolen and silk trades. They were prohibited, but prohibition of their use helped the weavers little, as smuggled goods and even the inferior native copies were used on all sides. Prohibition of imports was in turn followed by prohibition of the cotton printing trade in France, with the consequence that smuggling and illicit printing were far more lucrative than ever. Interesting. The French prints of the 17th and early 18th centuries, however, do not appear to have been of good quality, and all the leading improvements were introduced by Oberkampf, either as the inventions of members of his firm or adopted bodily from abroad. In the pre-Oberkampf period was principally one of copies of Indian goods. These being very fashionable and very expensive, it was naturally the aim of French workers to imitate them as closely as possible, using as a ground linen or imported calicos. They did not appear to have attempted, as was the case in Switzerland and England. Switzerland, now, he hasn't even mentioned Switzerland, I don't think, in this entire book, except now. So that's interesting. They do not appear to have attempted, as was the case in Switzerland and England, to obtain the effects in somewhat the same way as the Oriental workers did, by using madder and other fast dye stuffs in conjunction with suitable mordants, but used the far simpler, though of course much less satisfactory plan of simply printing the fabric with pigments, which, even if they were comparatively fast to light, were fugitive if washed. Colors thus applied always have a heavy, dull look about them by reason of the thickening medium used to make them work, and must, from all points of view, except that of cheapness, have compared unfavorably with the imported toile paintes, P-E-I-N-T-E-S. So, painted toile, I'm assuming, or something toile. Still, when new and fresh, they no doubt resembled them sufficiently to enable those who wore them and used them for furnishing purposes to feel that they were quite in the mode. A consummation devoutly to be wished at all times by that section of the community which prefers veneered deal to solid oak and stucco to plain brick. Something tells me that is a snooty dig at lower class people. Certainly at the end of the 17th century, all who had any pretensions to fashion had to obtain the admired decorated cottons or confess themselves ignorant of the dictates of Madame la Mode. Molière, laughing at Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, shows M. Jourdain displaying his ungraceful figure in a gown of Indian chintz. His tailor had said that fashionable people always wore chintz dressing gowns in the morning. Fashion's dictates had to be followed, so the poor fellow had to throw off his comfortable bourgeois attire and make himself ridiculous in the quaint garb which those of the court alone knew how to wear with the requisite aplomb. I don't know how you ever say that word. Enormous quantities of Indian prints were poured into the country and used as hangings for rooms and beds and as covers for tables, as well as for personal wear. Some men are said to be born in the purple. Oberkampf may be described as nurtured in a dyer's vat. Now I wonder what born in the purple means. Does that mean like royalty? I don't know. I'll have to look that up. So Oberkampf may be described as nurtured in a dyer's vat. From his earliest years, he was brought up amongst the enthusiasts in the dyer's art who found the principal interest of their lives in the pursuit of new methods and improved technique. His grandfather was a dyer working at Weihingen, then in the Duchy of Württemberg. These Middle European or Western European little, I don't know, communities. I don't know what you would call them. And he brought up his son to follow his own profession. This young man, as was in those days the custom, traveled through Europe, seeking to perfect himself in his craft by studying it in other centers. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to do that? Let's see. Traditionally born in the purple, was a category of members of royal families. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought, because purple is like a royal color. So that's what I thought. Loosely expanded to include all children born of prominent or high-ranking parents. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Thank you for confirming. And Quiltish, I assume you were saying yes to that as well. So, for once, I might have had something right. So, during his wandering, he learned to produce patterns in reserve. That is to say, to print a design on the fabric before it was dyed, so that the dye would not take on the printed parts, but left the pattern showing in white on a blue ground. He interrupted his journeyings to teach his father this improvement on the plain colors with which he had previously had to rest content, and resumed his travels, settling ultimately at Weisenbach, where he married and where his son, Christoph Philipp, the Oberkampf, was born in 1738. So I'm guessing Christoph Philipp is the one who's eventually going to become the Oberkampf that we're concerned with. So Oberkampf pair, so the father Oberkampf, dad Oberkampf, was an enthusiast about textile printing. However, in receiving the offer of a post in a works where woolen stuffs were printed in one or two colors from copper plates, he handed over his dye works to one of his brothers and transported himself and his family to Klosterheilbronn in 1744. Here, he was principally occupied with woolen materials, but he had opportunities of conducting experiments on cotton, and at last succeeded in carrying his efforts to a successful issue, and succeeded in printing blue patterns on a white ground, a result long desired, but hitherto found impossible. His discovery led to his appointment to a position in a Chintz works at Bale, B-A-L-E, but the A has that over it. I knocked over my keyboard. Something is happening here. Okay. So wherever this is, his Chintz works at whatever. And the apprenticing of Christoph Philipp to the same employment in 1749. So that would make Christoph Philipp like 9 years old. No, 12, 11 years old. I should be able to do math better than that. So he was apprenticed at 11. The little fellow, who thus started his life's work at the mature age of 11 by stirring the colors in the tubs, soon rose to more important duties. So before we go on, these are a couple of different cottons, French cottons, and show you these. I think these are very pretty. But still, you know, they scream chintz. He was naturally intelligent and industrious, and when his father started printing works of his own in 1752, he was able to make himself very useful indeed. At the age of 19, he felt his need for further knowledge, and in his turn set off on his own travels, though his father naturally objected to losing so intelligent and willing a helper. But father, you got to go on your grand tour. Why can't your son? And he took an early opportunity of recalling him to instruct his younger brother in the new methods he had learned. Then he was once more released in 1758 and set off for Paris. Here he found his ignorance of the French language a great difficulty. Why, I too would. In spite of this, he made his way to success. He was engaged in a Chintz printing works owned by an M. Cotton, Cottin, who was anxious to improve the methods he employed, had sent to Switzerland for skilled craftsmen. His manufactory was situated in the Closepan, a privileged quarter exempt from the restrictions which existed elsewhere. Here the work, until his arrival, was all done in fugitive colors. So I guess that's stuff that was just painted on. It is curious that this should have been the case, as 16 years before, Father Cordoue, we just read, had carefully written describing the Indian way of obtaining fast dyes. However, Oberkampf soon put this matter to rights and undertook the printing of calicos in fast tints. All this time, prohibition was still in force, and the customs officers did not hesitate to proceed to the most extreme lengths in carrying out their duties, even tearing the forbidden stuffs from the shoulders of ladies who had the misfortune to meet them thus clad. I think that he mentioned this earlier in the book. I want to say it was like the first chapter or so. He mentioned that these customs officers would and what a scandal it was, right? The influences of fashion must have been strong to have nerved people to face such very unpleasant encounters, but no doubt there was a certain chic in thus proving to all and sundry that the admired chintzes were the true, the beautiful, and even better, the enormously expensive imported Indian toile pintes. In the face of such determined opposition, and perhaps realizing that much of the 20 million of francs which it was calculated was spent on imported and smuggled goods. So 20 million francs, right? Is that what it said? Yeah, 20 million francs. No idea what that would mean. I mean, I think France uses the euro now anyway, but that seems like a lot. So that was calculated was spent on imported and smuggled goods, might instead of going to foreign manufacturers, be retained for the profit of French pockets. The government decided to remove the prohibition on calico printing in France in 1759. Oberkampf's star was in the ascendant. He was released from his contract with Cotton, who was practically bankrupt, and in partnership set up the historic manufactory of Jouy. It was uphill work at first, and when in May 1760, Oberkampf printed the first piece of cloth, he had to be draftsman, engraver, printer, and dyer. The premises were tiny, and the tools used in the work had to be put aside each night in order that he might find room to spread a mattress to sleep on, while the only place for storage was under the table. Sounds like he was drafting, engraving, printing, and dyeing in a closet. But the works grew and prospered. Financial difficulties were overcome by taking a new partner in 1763. And the firm was reconstituted under the title Saracen Desmarais et Oberkampf. Don't you love my French? Well, and Oberkampf, I guess, is whatever, the Middle Europe, Austro-Hungarian Empire name. In 1767, and thenceforth, both ends of every piece were printed with the stamp of the firm. Manufacture de toile pintes et imprimis de Saracen Desmarais et Oberkampf, Joy Press Versailles, Bon Tient. I should be ashamed for having read that way. The royal arms were added in 1787, but they were removed in 1792, probably because the monarchy was like, By this time, the works were enormously enlarged and splendidly organized so as to permit the now numerous work people to carry on their duties under suitable conditions and proper supervision. The work was passed on from one department to another in a manner which seems to be the prototype of modern ideals of factory management. Oh, very interesting. The different stages of carrying out the patterns were first the printing, imprimer, which gave the black outline, then the filling, rentreur, secondary printing, which might consist of 2, 3, or 4 blocks, each used with a different color, and the painting, which consisted in applying by hand those colors, especially indigo blue, which were difficult to print from blocks. Of the work people, the outline printers were the most skilled. The secondary fillings at Joy were being often carried out by women who were specially trained and skillful. The painter girls often made their brushes out of their own hair. Well. There were many other departments, such as the bleaching works, the dyeing vats, and the calendaring shop. Now, I know calendaring is that beating, pressing, making it shiny, putting pressure on the fabric. And at the heart of all was the office of Oberkampf, with its famous bell, which he rang himself for nearly 50 years, summoning his people to work and dismissing them in the evening. It is significant of the vast extent of the business that by 1767 it was necessary to have a guard room for the Swiss guards who watched over the safety of the bleaching calico which lay spread out in the surrounding meadows. That's interesting that there was a Swiss guard for this. Oberkampf was naturalized in 1770, thus obtaining all the rights and privileges of a Frenchman, which was a necessary step as his success exposed him to numerous attacks by the little great ones of the neighborhood. The little great ones. But nothing hindered the triumphant progress of the Toile de Juillet and their maker. In 1774, Oberkampf married, and the union turned out very successfully, though it really began rather inauspiciously. Oberkampf had come to the conclusion that his younger brother Frederick ought to marry and settle down, though Frederick himself appears not to have been so certain about it. However, the senior and his partner's wife selected a very suitable party, and all was settled. The two brothers paid their respects to the young lady, with the unexpected result that the elder brother became her husband. I don't know how that was inauspicious. Writing to his father, he says, "I was married yesterday to the lady who was suggested as Frederick's bride. She suits me much better than she would have suited him, so I asked him to give way to me, which he has done to my great joy." How many of you have brothers who, if another brother said, "Hey, she's not for you, I'm gonna go ahead and take her and marry her"? Would that fly today? I'm sure there are families that happens, but I think for the most part, most brothers would not be too thrilled about that. This was a very chivalrous way of putting it. A more truthful account may have said that the marriage was carried through by the elder brother in order not to break his word to the lady's family, Frederick not caring to carry out the contract. So it's that dowry type stuff, marriage contract type stuff. His good faith was rewarded, as his family life appears to have been exceedingly happy until his wife's death in 1782. Every year, Oberkampf used to go to Lorient, to London, and to Amsterdam in order to buy imported Indian cottons and to study the new patterns and fabrics. The English market was extremely important because there was a very large demand for his wares, which in some ways were superior to the homemade goods. Foreign orders poured in as well as those from nearer home. Trianon, St. Cloud, Bellevue, and Montreal had decorations of toile de joie, which added to the demand. Marie Antoinette took an interest in Oberkampf, perhaps on account of his being, like herself, a stranger in a strange land. She sent for him to Trianon and personally inspected his work. Thus, royal patronage culminated in 1783, when by letters patent dated from Versailles, June 19, 1783, the establishment received the title of Manufacture Royale. This was not a mere empty title, but carried with it important immunities and prerogatives. So you know what? I'm looking here to see. Okay, the Royal Arms was added in 1787. Okay, I thought that might be around here. Because I was thinking, maybe the Royal Arms disappeared when the royalty was executed, but the dates don't work out. It is interesting to note that on this date, Jouy dispatched its goods to the following cities: London, 10 houses; Amsterdam, Antwerp, Berlin, Brussels, Constantinople, Copenhagen, Frankfurt, Hamburg, Lisbon, Luxembourg, Madrid, Salonika, Trieste, and Ile-de-France. In 1785, he married again and was again most fortunate. His second wife was a woman well suited to the position her husband was now taking, and was qualified to uphold the new dignity bestowed by Louis XVI, who, in 1787, conferred on him letters of nobility. So this, I guess, is when that royal seal was added. These letters were published in 1788, and the assembly convoked to hear them read was probably one of the last of this character. In 1789, the partnership with M. de Marais was finally wound up, greatly to the regret of both partners, but the further expansions which were contemplated could hardly have been carried out if it had continued, though, as a matter of fact, the political circumstances delayed the immense extensions which had been proposed. During the early days of the Revolution, commerce was practically at a standstill. Suddenly, however, there was a revival in the demand for printed cottons, and in 1790 the new buildings were begun, and Oberkampf, with his keen business sense, realizing that it was better to have in stock stores of white calico, which would not go out of fashion than paper money, which was depreciating from day to day, bought every yard of imported cotton that was suitable for printing and warehoused it for further use. This guy was smart. He saw the writing on the wall. His operations were most successful because, simplicity being the only fashion, no one wanted silk and everyone dressed in cotton. I remember reading and seeing, I've actually seen the painting, this whole idea of like the French, the court, the French court, and people really being into cotton all of a sudden. Marie Antoinette herself wore, and again, this is moving on, this late 1700s, early 1800s. She wore this gown of like white cotton lawn, and it was all, floofy. It was supposed to be like she was, play acting like she was a shepherdess, I guess. And she had a portrait painted wearing it, and people were absolutely scandalized. They were like, she's wearing her underwear. Our queen is wearing her underwear. And so I think that's where this, like, people dressing in cotton wanted to emulate the queen. So this, real quick, is another plate of, one is a red print and one is a design by Proudhon. So this looks more like a medallion type of thing. I mean, I would not have looked at these and said, oh, chintz. But I guess this is falling into that category of these printers. That medallion one at the top is kind of cool. About this time, he had a little difficulty about a pattern which was in preparation. It originally represented Louis XVI, Restaurateur de la Liberté. Liberty Restaurant? What? Quite at the moment when the engraving was begun, it took a year to complete, and the outlook was daily changing. To suit the circumstances, Oberkampf had many of the details changed. Religion became liberty by the simple expedient of doing away with her crucifix. Medallions representing groups of cupids were altered to represent representations of the battles. Of the ruins of the Bastille and so on. I'm not sure he's talking about things we don't have a picture of, so. But the general disquiet and the constant demands for money on behalf of the government, don patriotique, souscription patriotique, empreinte force, I don't know, and so on. So I guess this is, if you're patriotic, you're going to pay taxes? I don't know. And so on. Besides, the constant depreciation in the assignats caused Oberkampf to be somewhat anxious as to financial matters, especially as, in order to keep his work people employed, he continued to manufacture goods and to store them. No wonder that he was worshipped by his employees as little less than a demigod. It was not until 1799 that he was reluctantly compelled to dismiss some of his men, but he was soon able to take them on again, as he found that he could keep his hands busy by printing calico belonging to merchants who paid him for the decoration of their cloth. And the business of building and enlarging the works was ever continued. By 1805, prosperity reigned once more. There was such a demand for cottons that they were bespoken while yet unfinished. Oh, hi! Melon lemon flavored. Thank you for coming by. So quilting more like quitting. Oh no. Well, I'm sorry. Please don't give up quilting. Quilting is good. But today we're not actually talking about quilting. We are talking about chintz fabric. And I am reading from the Chintz Book by MacIver Percival. So, in 1806, yet another honor was bestowed on Oberkampf. Napoleon and the Empress Josephine, accompanied by a suite of 30 persons, paid a surprise visit to the factory. Napoleon was enormously pleased to see the swift working of the printing machines, one of them having been set in motion under his eyes. The white cloth entering on one side passed under the engraved cylinder and emerged on the other, printed at the rate of 7.5 meters a minute. 7.5 meters a minute. That seems very slow. But I'm sure it was amazing back then. When the cylinder was changed and another pattern was printed, the reserve cylinders, ranged in rows to the number of 200, attracted his attention. Okay, all right, that's a lot. And on learning that 25 of them were made from the cannons he had taken in 1796 from the Pope, he was delighted and called his aides to him to laugh over what struck him as a great joke. Holy moly. So 25 of these printing cylinders were made from cannons that Napoleon took from the Pope. Now, first of all, the fact that the Pope had cannons is interesting. And the fact that Napoleon got them. And then they were turned into printing plate or printing cylinders. You can't make this stuff up. As usual, Napoleon overwhelmed everyone with a storm of questions, to which Oberkampf and his colleagues, Pétionne and Widmer, were kept busy replying. The visit was a great success, and at its close, Napoleon, pretending to notice for the first time that Oberkampf was not decorated, took off his own cross of the Legion of Honor, a gold officer's crown, and gave it to him, remarking that no one was more worthy to wear it. In 1809, Oberkampf received the Decennial Prize, Grand Prix de One class, instituted for valuable service to science and art. The reports of the jury and the commission show the importance attached to his work, as shown in the following extracts. M. Oberkampf. Oh, I'm not going to read this. It's all in French. I was just, wait, I can't read this. It is a full paragraph. I'm not gonna embarrass myself. So anyway, yeah, it doesn't have a translation either. So okay, they said something very nice. Science and arts. Here's your award. Napoleon again visited the works in 1810, bringing with him the Empress, at that time Marie Louise. Oberkampf, being absent, left commands that he should come and see him at St. Cloud the following Sunday for the purpose of questioning him mainly on the subject of England and the cotton industry, his mind being full of the prohibition of English goods and the new customs tariff, which amounted, in fact, to a commercial revolution. Oberkampf was a piece on the board in which, Oberkampf was a piece on the board in the game he was playing against England. An important piece, too, in the emperor's opinion. Oh, very interesting. Okay, so again, we've got some French stuff. the French words here. I don't know. It's something to the effect of, down with the English. I recognize Anglais. That's about it. This would probably be a quick translation, but we'll keep going. Jouy had seen its most prosperous days, and the last few years of Oberkampf's life were shadowed by grief and disappointment. Though very many improvements in the mechanical side of the manufacture were made, principally introduced from England. 2 members of the firm, having received special permission from the Emperor to visit England in 1811, they managed to smuggle drawings of various useful machinery into France in the binding of a music portfolio. And they also brought patterns of new designs. So that's interesting. We know this definitely happened also coming from England to the U.S. John Hewson being the guy that snuck these printing press plans out back to the U.S. And he had a very, very prosperous, fabric mill, printing mill in New England during this time period, I'm guessing. If I remember correctly, would have been this time period. So yeah, the the corporate intrigue and espionage was strong with the printing presses. One of these novelties was the 2-cylinder printing machine, one cylinder being engraved to print the outline, the other with the design in relief applied the filling hitherto carried out by the hand printing. But things were going badly. The workers had to be put on short time, and even for a time production ceased. So again, this is all the strife going on, I suppose. Jouy was in the midst of military activities, and the disturbed condition of the country reflected itself in the state of trade. Let's see real quick. Let's look at these 2 plates. These are toile de Jouy. Manufacturing processes, interesting, and then the wolf and the lamb. So it's interesting. And this one, again, these medallion things, I guess they are toiles. This definitely, to me, says toile, but this, I don't know. I guess these medallion type things, I had never really thought about what do they, are they a toile? Are they a chintz? Are they their own thing? Are they neither? The constant anxiety told on Oberkampf. By this time, an old man, and in 1815, the year of Waterloo, he died. After his death, the fabric that he had built up fell to pieces, and in 1843, the whole of the works were pulled down and sold. During the whole period covered by Oberkampf's work at Jouy, he was constantly introducing improvements in technique and carrying out novelties and designs. In almost every case, he led the way both as to methods of manufacture and in providing new patterns. Other French cotton printers following him closely. He does not seem to have desired striking originality. His aim appears to have been to study closely the needs of his patrons and to be ever ready with a supply of suitable goods. Similarly, he made no revolutionary invention, but seized on ideas already in use and improved them and applied them to his own purposes. Many of his great successes were developments of ideas already exploited in England and Scotland. The principal landmarks relating to new styles and methods which he introduced into France are briefly as follows. Previous to 1759, it was forbidden to print chintzes except in a few privileged cases, though a certain amount of contraband printing was carried on. It was, however, done in fugitive colors until Oberkampf introduced fast dyes in 1759. The introduction of the chintzes in small patterns in imitation of the imported cottons known as Siamese cloths. These were printed by Oberkampf in a mixture of linen and cotton and were known as toiles d'orange de Jouy, 1763. About 1760, the prints in red, afterwards to develop into the best-known types of toile de Jouy, were introduced. They were at first mainly chinoiseries and were block printed. In 1768, a new process of decoration was tried, especially on the small patterns. It consisted of filling in spaces in the blocks with pins or brass. These were placed in rows like bristles in a brush, and they were printed as tiny dots. I think he talked about this also earlier on. And designs were also carried out entirely in picotage, as it was called. So, yeah, they had the carved wooden blocks, and then they hammered those little brass tacks in so that the spaces, the negative spaces around the printing could just have that little stipple design to kind of give it some shading or some depth. That's pretty brilliant. In 1769, the principal novelties were the designs on cameo. That is to say, designs carried out in different shades of a single color. At first, generally china blue, a fast dye. On or about 1770, the patterns of the single-colored prints became more varied, and landscapes with mills, pastoral scenes, and such subjects were very fashionable. In 1774, a new type of chintz was evolved, which was of great success. It consisted of bouquets of flowers, which were printed at some little distance from each other on a white ground, expressly made in Switzerland. The popularizing of printed cottons by the cheaper production made possible by mechanical improvements naturally led to the use of designs which were suited to the taste of the moment, and numerous prints dating them from about 1780 in single colors and also in 2 or 3 tints show that Oberkampf was appealing to a large market with less cultured tastes than before. Started to serve that middle class, weren't you, Oberkampf? About 1783, an extraordinarily interesting design by Hewitt, printed in single-color red, was issued, giving a view of the process in use at the factory. It shows the lengths of unprinted calico spread on the grass during bleaching. It is pegged out to preserve it from being blown away. Nearby is a small factory in a river, so essential to the enterprise, supplying as it did the necessary constant supply of good water. Workmen are shown busy damping and beating the cloth after it came back from the boilers, and an assistant figures as carrying the cloth which has been prepared for printing back to the factory. So this is really interesting. They literally made a toile showing the process of making toile. These details are subordinate to the principal portion of the design, which displays a printer using the block printing methods with his cloth spread on a table. Cloths hanging out to dry complete this part of the design. And so, is this the right date? Yeah. I think. Does this have the, yeah, 1783. So this is the one we just looked at. So I'll show that again. It sounds like this is what he means. So, I mean, this is that industry. The design, the Montgolfiers, the balloonists, was issued in 1783. The design, the Federation, was issued in 1790. About 1791, the patterns principally in use were very striking, such as large lozenges and zigzags. A very different class of taste had to be catered for. In 1793, there was a large sale of Persian designs introduced for furnishing purposes in England. In 1795, a very fashionable new style was introduced with a bronze ground closely covered with growing plants strewn with wildflowers. About 1806, an old fashion was revived, the printing of white reserve on a blue ground by exactly the same method used by Philippe Jacob Oberkampf in 1749, and by him taught to his son. From about 1795 on, there was an enormous output of those fabrics printed in a single color from copper plates and cylinders which are so well known. They were exported in quantities to England and must have had a great vogue here. Of course, he's from England, so. The pattern is printed from finely engraved copper plates, and the designs are of an especially pictorial character. They are, however, executed on so small a scale that they tell merely as a diaper and break up the mass of large surfaces very pleasantly if used with the right type of woodwork. And of course, diaper is a design element. It's not diaper like you put on a baby. Furniture of the type which followed Louis XVI and empire furniture of a simpler type has a totally different appearance in a room hung with these cottons to its appearance when backgrounded with plain or paper-hung walls. However tightly Chintz is stretched, there is always a considerable play of light and shade, which gives a sense of style to the ensemble, which is quite lacking in the individual pieces of furniture. So your expensive furniture will only look better with Chintz. The designs are carried out in various colors, red, snuff color, blue, purple, and dark brown all being favored. The classical types were evolved under the Directorate and were among the happiest of this class of design. In 1806, there was an industrial exhibition at the Louvre in a beautiful furnishing design, The Miller, His Son, and His Ass. Printed in amaranth was exhibited. It was an enormous success and had a long life as a successful pattern. Now, I hope we're talking about the Miller, his son, and their donkey. Here are two more. I don't think that either one of these is what he's talking about. The Miller, his son, and his ass. In 1809, a solid green color was introduced. Previously, green had been obtained by the two printings, blue and yellow, as we explore today. But it is not really a better effect, though it was hailed as an important invention. The broken color produced by the overprinting, one tint on the other, had a much happier effect. The works at Jouy naturally gave employment to numerous artists. It is not possible to connect the names of any particular designer with the earlier work, though a Mademoiselle Jouanon was working there as a flower painter in 1775 and was no doubt responsible for many of the charming floral patterns of that period. The others, amongst them J.G. Vitry, Garnier, Cavot, Pierre, and many others, are but names, as their signature does not appear on the prints. Later, it is possible to identify the work of several artists, as their original drawings were preserved in the Musée de l'Art Décoratif at Paris. So, the Museum of Decorative Arts. The best known is Jean-Baptiste Huet, who designed Travaux de la Manufacture, 1783. So, I'm guessing the one we just looked at. La Balancoire, 1789. La Fontaine, 1796. Le Lion, Amoureux. The Lover Lion. The Amorous Lion, I don't know. 1798. Loup et l'Agneau, 1804. Is that the sheep and the wolf? Lamb and the wolf? Meunier, Fille et l'Âne, 1806. Psyche and L'Amour, 1810. I think those are maybe the Cupid and I don't know. And many others. His style is freer than that of Hippolyte Lebas, who after Hewitt's death in 1811 designed very similar patterns for one-color printing. They are, however, much often cut up by his habit of enclosing the subjects in medallions and geometrical patterns. So yeah, those were fussy cut for different purposes. Le Colombes, 1814. Le Marchand d'Amours, 1817 are among his best. Pinelli's best known design is Scenes Romaines, 1811. Scenes of Rome. Others that can be identified are Paysage Suisse by de Marnay, 1814. Don Quixote, Heine, 1813. Monument de Paris and Monument de Midi, 1818, both by Lebas, and Costumes Militaires by Lamy, 1819, of which the decorative value is almost nil. Military costumes. La Chasse by Horace Vernet shows hunting as practiced at Versailles in 1815, while another print slightly later in date deals with an English hunt. And that is the end of the chapter. So, there is one last chapter, chapter 9. Wait a minute, let me make sure. Yeah, I think it's chapter 9 are the, oh, no. Yeah, there's a bibliography chapter, and then there's this dates and landmarks. We'll look at those another time. But let's look at this one last plate. This is 3 dress patterns on dark grounds, early 19th century. And so these really look like the kind of stuff, that you see in very old quilts. These dress patterns. And I really like that one. Those little circles with the flower in it. Very interesting. This one, that little figure, it almost looks like a monument or something in there. I don't know what that, if it's like a, I can get this close enough to see. Doesn't it almost look like a little monument in there in between those? I can't really tell what that is supposed to be, but it's interesting for the very least. Okay, well, we've got some really interesting stuff that's come out of this book. I have to say that MacIver, despite being this sort of proper sounding English gentleman, I do think he's much funnier than Avril Colby. Avril Colby being the British quilts writer in the mid 20th century and into the 70s. She was very proper and polite. And I can only think of one thing she said that was a little persnickety. But we've only read one of her books. So when I finish the Chintz book, well, the question is, what do we do next? We still have Carrie Hall's book and Rose Kretzinger. I think that might be a good one for the next one. I need to go through my stuff. I mean, obviously, I'm always shooting for stuff that is definitely safe, public domain. I'm never going to read you books of somebody who's still alive unless they give me permission. And even some of the ones that are, the authors are long deceased, I always want to be careful about copyright because, some folks passed that copyright down to their family. Their family kept it going, or reprinted these books. So you have to be very careful. So yeah, if you guys have any ideas, you know where I am on social media, or if you don't, I'm the Stephanie Cake on Instagram, or you can find me quiltnerding at gmail.com or quiltnerding on YouTube. Obviously here every Tuesday or every Monday and Thursday. So you know where to get in touch with me. So yeah, shoot me some ideas if you've got something that you want to look at or that you would like me to read. I thought there's a couple of things where I think I can do some magazine leafing that I had actually planned to do a while back and I got sidetracked. But Fiber Arts Magazine has got some interesting stuff I want to look at, but we're not going to go through a whole issue. We'll look at maybe some articles. So maybe have that in the works. But yeah, let me know what you think if you come up with anything. So I'm going to call it. Today was a little bit of a long day. I think I have nothing urgent to say. I'm gonna have to cancel a one Monday stream coming up. It's not gonna be this coming Monday though. It'll be the one after. So I'll remind you guys. But next week's a holiday in the U.S., July 4th. But I'll be here business as usual Monday and Thursday. So then of course we have quilt nerding on Tuesday and Wednesday. So yeah, I think that's gonna do it. Have a wonderful Friday Eve, the rest of your day, my friends, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend. As always, thank you so much. I could not do this without you guys. Oh, Monday is Canada Day. Okay. Well, thanks, Quiltish. I don't know. I'm not sure, what do you guys do for Canada Day? Is that like our 4th of July? I'm so terrible. I have many Canadian friends, and I'm terrible about. Oh my gosh, Druid. You are a rock star. Okay, like our 4th. Okay. Well, if you are doing things on Monday, we will certainly be thinking of you, and I will remember that it's Canada Day and wave the maple leaf. But yeah, so have a wonderful weekend. I cannot do this without you. So, as always, whether you're one of my longtime subscribers, or if you're just new here and you suffer through commercials, or if you're one of my lurkers, or if you're one of the folks that always watches in replay because of your time zone, I appreciate you. Certainly couldn't do this without you. I wouldn't like to hear myself talking to the void. So it's all good that you're here. So yeah, I'm going to peel out now, and I will talk to you guys soon. So, mwah!